Go ahead.
Start it again.
Let's go. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, family. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, who raised amongst us a divine leader, teacher, and guide, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the exalted Christ, and to his prized student, his prized pupil, who is a reminder amongst us today, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I greet all of you again in the words of peace and paradise. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Brother Frederick Douglass Dixon, and today we're going to discuss the importance of education, and more specifically, we're going to discuss 3 topics and how it is that we inject the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad into formal curriculum. Well, I'll begin to tell my story by starting from the beginning and explain that I am second generation educator, which means that my household was full of how to learn, how to educate, and how to teach black people. More specifically, my father is the Honorable Professor Willie Dixon Jr., who's 85 years young, who still teaches today, who taught me to teach in a manner that's historically accurate and uncompromising. He has had a long career with WVON in Chicago, Illinois, as well as the DuSable Museum of Chicago, Illinois. So my teachings about how to teach come from a very radical perspective when we think about the American education system. And more specifically, being historically accurate isn't just enough. So we have to have a 360-degree understanding. 120 degrees of knowledge, 120 degrees of understanding, and 120 degrees of wisdom is indeed inevitable in the raising of the masses of our people. So when we begin to talk about the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad and how we can inject these teachings into a formal curriculum, I had the pleasure of being a professor at Kennedy King College in Chicago and also Chicago State University, which are inner city schools, higher education, that the student population is 90+% black. Young people striving to understand themselves. So with that population came a lot of responsibility. And the responsibility was to raise the masses of that group to higher levels of intellect, but to inform them about who they were, who they are, and how the world would treat them, and have them prepared to be able to transform themselves into intellects and those who would go back into their community and become leaders. So I've had the pleasure of sitting under some of the most astute African-American professors in the world, I would say. Dr. Jake Carruthers and Dr. Anderson Thompson from the Carruthers Center of Inner City Studies is one of the places that I received formal training. So when I was in front of our people for years as one who was going to pass esoteric information, it became more than apparent to me as a believer and a student of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad that there are ways that we can inject his teachings into formal curriculum. Now, I have to be very clear, so I want to clear up a few misnomers. At Kennedy King College, there was a African American Studies program that I created in 2010. And to my ignorance, I thought that I was indeed the very first person to create an African American Studies program, which is not true. As early as 1968, students were calling for black studies at Kennedy King College. And the remembrance of that particular era left a curriculum. And up until 2010, some of those classes were still approved by the Illinois Community College Board. One in particular was called Sociology 209. the black man in America. Yes, this was a sociology class. So essentially, I'm teaching black history from sociology. Intro to sociology. Sociology 209 came about as I looked through the catalog and found this wonderful class that was approved by the Illinois Community College Board. But this was a class that was demanded from the Black Power movement. With this class, we began to look at what would be appropriate and what would be beneficial to our student population. So the very first thing that I thought is that the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad should be injected into a class called The Black Man in America. So one of the books for mandated reading was this particular volume, The Message to the Black Man in America. Now, when we talk about the message to the black man in America and being able to forward this to a group of students who had never heard of this particular book, very few had. But the majority were not only willing to learn, but they were eager to learn. And for their own edification, they understood that it was important. There was a natural connection between the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and a group of young black students who had never had their hands on this information. So with this particular class, we began to use the message to the black man, and we began to use the Fall of America as required readings. Now, this was very much so a task that was of upper importance. So I began to ask those who were wiser than me, those who knew more about the subject, those who had been a part of the Nation of Islam prior to my understanding what the Nation of Islam was, to assist me. And yes, I got full support, above and beyond full support, from those key people that I had known for years. So I want to go to the importance of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teaching and formal curriculum. And I want to make sure that there are three things that I wanted to discuss. And the three things about bringing a new curriculum or a new educational paradigm and what it must do and how it ties to the teachings. First thing it must do is eradicate the current system of Western education that is indeed steeped and drowned in white supremacy. So what Bobby Wright, the great psychologist, said, that the education that we have our hands on, for blacks, it has them look to their friends as enemies and enemies as friends. So this is what I was dealing with from the very beginning. Part two, it must erase the deficit model found rooted in the eugenics movement that points directly to blacks being innately inferior. If this curriculum is going to uplift, it must also promote a self-consciousness, a black self-consciousness that will raise the mass of thoughts for every black man, woman, and child by using historical accuracies. So when we talk about being the original man, the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad become the key. When we begin to talk about how we can raise the masses of our thoughts, then we look to what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad says, and I'm going to read this quote on page 67 from Message to the Black Man. Get an education, but not an education that leaves us as inferior position and without a future. Get an education, but not an education that leaves us looking for a job. We need an education, but not an education that does not remove the shackles of slavery and servitude. So this natural connection between the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and our students, after they begin to read the teaching, is immediately transformative. So when we think about the importance of just the topics, and we've only have time for a short few to go over, which does not do any justice, but it indeed lets us know how accurate these teachings and just the transformative measures of the teachings. Page 52, who is the original man? Up until the time I had read Message to the Black Man and become a believer of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, no one had told me that I was not only the original man, but the aboriginal man. This goes directly to the teachings. More specifically, page 59 was elevate and protect the black woman. Now, I have to tell you that this entire population at Kennedy King and Chicago State, the majority of these students were black women who were seeking to find themselves, who were seeking to find that information that would raise them from being less than black women, but to bring them as sisters in their own right, in taking them back to their original state. Page 31, know thyself. When we begin to talk about knowing oneself, the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad will make you a scientist. What do we mean by a scientist? Well, when we begin to talk about science, science comes from the root word seal, which means to know. So there are 196,940,000 square miles on the planet Earth, taught to us by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The circumference of the Earth, 24,896 miles, taught to us by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The diameter, 7,926 miles. 93 million miles from the sun to the earth. Rotates 1,037 and 1/3 degree per hour. The teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad make you a scientist. Take you from being a person who has limited knowledge to one who is a world educator, one who will be able to travel with the light of understanding under the searchlight of truth. So to back these teachings up and to forward these teachings in a far more brilliant and consistent manner than I ever could, I asked for help. And I asked no other than the Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Yes, indeed, I wrote a formal letter and asked him, how should I go about completing this task? What's important to complete this task? And the idea of asking him to come to the class, bless this classroom with his presence. And again, November 8th, 2012, the Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan came to Kennedy King College to teach us about the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad in the classroom of Sociology 209, the Black Man in America. His lecture was amazing. He charged our young people with finding out esoteric information and to take the words of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad as a guideline to their future. So we're talking about the baddest black man on the planet, a Georgia-born black man who they say didn't go that far in formal education. But if you are to judge a man by what they leave behind. And when we look at some of his pupils, of course, his prize pupil, the Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, our dear brother Malcolm, and the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali, are just some of the students that have become world beaters, if you will, champions for the black man, woman, and child under the thoughts of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So when we talk about formal education, how did I inject the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad? With the fortitude of a soldier, with the understanding of a God, all brought about by the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now, this is a groundbreaking educational conference. And indeed, we are moving forward to building a new educational paradigm and building a new world. And the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad are indeed the key. So I thank Almighty Allah for Master Farad Muhammad. I thank him for the messenger, the exalted Christ, and again, his prized pupil, the Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I can never thank him enough for taking time from his hectic schedule to come to the classroom and to show the importance of the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, again, I say unequivocally, without a doubt, the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad have to be injected into the formal curriculum. I thank you all for this small time that we had. I bless you with the greetings of peace and paradise. Assalamu alaikum. Peace and power.